Set.
Sorry, everybody, technical difficulty. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town Board's work session for Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. Can I get a motion from a Town Board member to open up our work session, please?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So the first thing that we have on our agenda this evening is a joint meeting between the Town Board and the Architectural Review Board. This is the first one we've had in quite a while, and we're excited to have the members of the ARB with us this evening. I'm going to introduce the chair of the ARB, Bob Schenkel, who is then going to introduce the members that we have with us this evening.
Okay, hi. Thank you, Ivy, and thanks to the whole Town Board for inviting us to participate in this. We're happy to be here and to meet with you guys. So I'd like to introduce the board. We have Ann Hasagawa, Stanley Wong, Sarah Dursa, Brendan Rudolph, and Travis Bechtel. Did I miss anybody? And Claudia Mula. Is Claudia here? There you are. Okay, so we read through the form-based core code. We spent a couple of sessions working with Sabrina and, to kind of have a discussion amongst ourselves, because we don't always agree amongst ourselves, as probably you guys don't either amongst yourselves. It's good to have a healthy dialogue. Daisy was kind enough to try to put together some meeting minutes, and we worked together and gave it to you guys. Now, if you've had a chance to look at it. I think we broke it into like 4 categories of topics that we see that are probably worthy of a discussion. One is just the ARB's role and function in the form-based code. We read through it and we saw in black and white that people were going to be able to get building permits without coming to the ARB. So it kind of looked on the surface like this would be our one and only opportunity to be a participant. And, we're all professionals in the design and architectural industry. And I think we're volunteers and we think we can help. And we would like to have a role and be a participant in the project as it goes and as applicants come and as pieces of the puzzle start to get designed and built. The second is the form-based code picked 5 different specific architectural styles. So the possible, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but the possible Disneyfication, so to speak, of the town, and is that appropriate? And we talked about contemporary design, which was not one of the 5. Admittedly, it's kind of hard to put design guidelines on contemporary. We talked about that a bit. We may talk about that a little bit more, but is it appropriate to have contemporary design as one of the opportunities besides Queen Anne and Italianesque and some of the other ones over there? We looked at Gray Williams' letter, and he's a terrific person in the town and is so filled with information. But, the identification of landmark structures, which ones are really worthy of being landmarked from a historic and or a design, we thought maybe it was a little too much, so to speak. And then lastly, just the general urban design issues in terms of building heights, construction in the train station parking lot. There was nothing about about big structured parking garages. It would seem to me, I'm a real estate developer, so I've seen these kind of opportunities. If someone were to develop in the train station parking lot, you need to do replacement parking. And are we going to have big structured parking garages? And how's that going to work? Excuse me, what's that going to look like? There didn't seem to be any design standards for it. So with that, and since I've had a chance to speak for a bit, does any of the ARB want to, comment before we get into, I don't know if you want to have an interactive discussion. It's hard with not being together, but. So do any of my board members have anything they want to share right now?
I think that was a good summary of the conversation. Thanks, Bob.
Okay. All right, so maybe if we can discuss with the board now, how do you see the role of the ARB we had a very little role. We have a tremendous role in people's houses and little pieces of the puzzle in the community. And we like to think we try to do a good job to help, balance people's desires with having appropriate things built that look appropriate and are good for the community. We really had very little role in Chapel Hill Crossing and sometimes in other, sizable projects that sometimes they bypass us. So we would like to have a role, not to be a bottleneck or a thorn, but to be help to the town board.
I mean, I'll start and then others can kind of jump in, and I'd also be interested in hearing, Sabrina, your feedback on this as well. And I did read through your meeting minutes, which I don't know, Daisy, if you're taking the meeting minutes, but they're awesome. So thank you. They were great. It really helped me to get a flavor for what the conversation has been with the ARB. But, I think when you talk about, you started off by saying, that under the form-based code, the idea would be that, a property owner would be able, a developer would be able to obtain building permits without having to go before the ARB. And I think my response to that would be, yes, that's what that says. And I think that at the time that it was drafted, that it was being crafted, that was very much the goal, not with the idea of cutting the ARB out, but rather to elicit your feedback up front, as it were, get your kind of best and deepest thinking into the form-based code, then create something that is, sort of repeatable and thus streamlining the process for the property owner, for the future developer, to be able to move more swiftly through the process. Because one of the things that we are very much trying to react to and to design a code around is the notion that the, sort of the process to date that a property owner, that a developer goes through in order to build something new, or even to, sort of build on what exists today, is so cumbersome that it is limiting the ability of people to take projects and move them forward. So, trying to incentivize that is at the heart what we're trying to do. So that was the initial goal. Now, I think now speaking just as myself, I'm very interested in hearing from you your sort of reflections on that. So if you're then saying to me, right, but having us just sort of weigh in on the code and building our input into the upfront piece of the process feels like a missed opportunity, because we're subject matter experts and we believe that we can play a role throughout I'm very open to hearing that feedback from you guys, but I do want to validate that yes, what you read and what you interpreted is in fact by design the way that it was crafted initially.
I think there's a real risk of somebody having the best intentions and taking parts of the code and piecing them together and having it, check all the boxes and have it not be aesthetically pleasing. There needs to be some, oversight at the end, looking at scale and proportion and kind of how it fits into the context of its site to make sure that it really works. Saying that you meet all the requirements of this code and having nobody really check what that looks like as a finished product could be pretty dangerous, I think, if there's not that oversight.
And I think what's interesting for me then, Sabrina, is, you and I have kind of had this conversation on the side, and I can see you smiling because you probably know what I'm about to say, which is that, in my mind, that oversight is meant to happen by professional town hall staff, and we don't have a professional town hall architect on staff who would be doing that design check. And so I think the question then becomes, is there a way to either, how do we deal with that? And is that a role that the ARB would be interested in playing then, or could play? I don't have an answer for that, but that's what comes up for me when I hear Sarah mention that.
I want to interject a little bit because in working with the ARB, you know, it was very enlightening in the sense of how much detail, you know, our code has been criticized in the past. It doesn't have enough architectural guidance or detail in it. And here we have a proposed code that's very rich with certain guidelines for architecture, maybe not to the breadth that everybody wants, but you know, what is that balance between, you know, having enough information in a code to signify this is kind of what we're looking at, versus too much. And I think that that's kind of where I'm looking at this now is what is that, where is that happy marriage of enough to provide guidance, but not so detailed that you get put into a box, and then, you know, dealing with the what type of architectural review does the town want, need, prefer for these applications, because the only professional discipline we don't have on staff is an architect. And you know, there's been discussions about consulting out to an architect who would work for the town for this regard. Or maybe it is the ARB and we keep the ARB involved during the building permit process like they are now, and maybe invoke them earlier on in the process so that they can see the evolution. Again, you know, up for discussion. I really don't have the answer, but I think we can handle it several different ways and try and really get at providing the best opportunity for guidance that we can.
It seems like the right marriage, assuming
Sorry,
the planning board. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It seems like the right marriage, assuming the board wants to do it, meaning the architectural review board, that if we don't have an architect, and instead of spending the money to get an architect, and if the role is still somewhat, if not fully the same, it's just moving it to a different place or calling it a different thing, but the role is still there. If they don't approve of something and it's not done in the right way, they still have a committee that's dealing with town staff on that at that point. So it seems like that authority still remains. So just my own opinion, that's the right marriage. It keeps them in the process and also brings them in the front end as well.
I agree with Jeremy on that, especially because just with your point, Sabrina, saying that we don't have a designated staff person who addresses architectural needs. And with that, I also think that the risk involved with not having an architectural review, especially if we are considering removing the breadth of architectural styles, which I completely support. I mentioned that in the last town board meeting, because I do agree that it is very stifling. Would be really helpful to have the architectural review board go through that stage. But I will say, you know, from experience as a homeowner, and as well as, you know, folks in town who own property in the hamlet, I think the challenge with the planning board and the architectural review board are the calendar dates, and addressing the timeliness of when people apply is where I think we can really hit the right mark, because I believe the ARB meets twice a month, like the planning board. Okay.
First and third Wednesdays.
Right. So if you miss that one meeting, then you got to go to the next meeting. And so it just creates, you know, a time lag that is really frustrating for folks, especially because, you know, sometimes they didn't even know, for example, myself, I didn't even know that that was required when, you know, submitting a permit application. So I think that there's certainly a way to resolve this with your expertise, as well as just looking at the process as it relates to timing and staging out the permit application.
So I actually agree with Lauren. I think that, well, Bob, I learned a new verb today. I didn't know Disneyfication was a verb, but I like it. And I think we don't want to Disneyfy the town. And I agree that we should take out those standards, because I've heard everyone, and I think to put the town in an architectural straitjacket, for lack of a better term, you know, isn't really allowing for creativity, especially if we're trying to look at net zero buildings and other types of of buildings. So I agree with Lauren in that regard. And I do think that maybe there is a way to streamline the process, and we'd want to work with you for that, so that any type of rezoning that's coming in, if they need to go to the Architectural Review Board, that there's a way we can do it that maybe hastens the process while still making sure we're getting your review. Because to me, to pay for an architect on staff when we have all this talent on the ARB would be a waste of funds, when we can utilize your talent now, as long as we can figure out a way to do it, maybe a little more expeditiously.
Well, we haven't discussed this, and it was just something that popped into my mind, but perhaps, and my fellow board members can disagree with me completely, but maybe we form some type of subcommittee within the Architectural Review Board, just a few people, and they address obviously both the homes, but they also address the town buildings in a more timely fashion. It's a option, but again, we haven't discussed it, but I think there are ways.
Some of it depends. If someone's going to take a single storefront in town and redo a slice of, it's much more simple. If somebody's going to take a big block like where Rite Aid is, or if something would happen with town hall, the train station, or some big block, it's very different. It's much more ambitious and different and more complicated.
Are there elements of the form? So if the architectural styles are removed from the code, are there elements of the form part of it, the scale, the scope, the windows, that the ARB could agree on preemptively to give a builder, some of the answers and expectations up front to kind of help streamline the process?
If I may just interject real quickly, Lori, the code talks about form, scale, the relief, the undulation of buildings, separate and apart from architectural styling. Okay, so there's a difference between the other elements of massing and bulk that are discussed in the code that are separate from the architectural styling. And from what I've been hearing, the architectural styling is problematic. One of the other suggestions that the ARB had talked about, and I don't want to speak for you guys, but what I thought was really interesting was, there has been a lot of relevance in the draft code to what's here now, and why we're looking at the architectural styles we're looking at, but maybe to require a development project of a certain size or, a certain magnitude to talk about the architectural detailing that they want to promote and how it fits in, not Disneyfies, but fits in with Newcastle, with the Chappaqua Hamlet, and to have that as part of the application that is made to build.
Well, I think part of it is, when do these events happen? It's how much time and effort and money does the developer put in before he comes to the Architectural Review Board or presents his idea. I know in the city, because I work in there, there's a way to do an informal meeting with certain people to present an idea and say, I'm going to go in this route. Do you think it's viable? And it's early in the process, and it gives them, some confidence in moving forward before they spend a lot of money in doing a design. So I think there's got to be some extra steps in there, and maybe that'll tax our BAR. But I think, that gives the developer some confidence that he can move forward if they get feedback right away.
What I had also seen in the notes that I read from your meetings, and I can't remember which board member made this suggestion, but I thought it was an interesting one, that, maybe rather than being quite so rigid, that maybe there's sort of a middle ground between, sort of rigidly prescribing architectural styles and not having them in there at all. So somebody had suggested, maybe we could say, for example, these styles, and for, so that at least there's some guidance as to what we're looking for, sort of to even even a step before we get to the meeting that you're suggesting, Stanley, so that people come into the meeting with at least some clarity about, okay, here's what exists in Newcastle today. Here's the kind of thing that they're looking for, you know, because I think what we're trying to do, right, is streamline the process and signal to people, this is what we're looking for and the kinds of buildings that we want to be able to approve and see in the Chappaqua Hamlet.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it was touched upon in Gray Williams' letter of here are the historic buildings that he sees and here are the styles that have come and gone in the town. So I think we can use that as a basis of, you know, how does a developer come to us with a new idea, with a new kind of building that addresses, you know, retail nowadays and parking and residential and things like that on our streetscape, and make it very specific to our town and the scale of it. I think that would be helpful. So they almost have to do some homework, or their designer has to do some homework before they come to us. And you know, I think you're right. There is a document we have to do that gives them enough ammunition to create something for us to review.
And you do want to have some standards. You want some quality standards. I mean, we've talked for years about upgrading the quality of signage and storefronts and awnings and things like that. People come to us sometimes with something that looks, you know, not so attractive, and but it gets into a money thing too. Then you're telling somebody you have to spend a certain amount of money to get a certain quality level in the town. And as the town, you know, does the town want to enforce that? People take a photo of something down the street. Well, they did it. Why can't I do it? Kind of thing. So I do think you should have some standards, and it should be of a quality level that we think is appropriate for a town, for this town. What about, can I ask, because I will tell you, certainly not maybe for the board, but for me, I get frightened when I think about development in the train station parking lot. I think it's an incredible amenity for the community. We're a bedroom community. I don't commute to the city anymore. I drive, but I used to take the train for years, and getting in and out is difficult, and finding parking if you're not early, it's, you know, we need it, and it really is a great amenity. If you build in it, you're going to need big parking garages, and how is that going to work, and what are they going to look like? I was surprised that there was no architectural, you know, definition for them. What are you guys thinking about that? I can ask the board, town board.
In terms of architecture, I certainly am not equipped to make that statement. I'm not, you know, I know what I know and I know what I don't know, and architecture is in the latter category. From a personal perspective, I think, you know, although it's not happening in terms of we plan on implementing the form-based code in whatever form it is, because that would just be North Greeley, I think that, again, not an architectural issue. I think that if you expect or anticipate that driving is going to be less, and you expect and anticipate that commuting is going to be less, why do you want to sit on blacktop for the sake of blacktop, that not added to outside of the tax roll, that you could get some private company and have a partnership with them to create something that you and I can't see now? Why not at least have that conversation? You don't have to do it. You don't have to be married to it, but you're not going to even have the conversation. It's not going to exist. So if it turns out in 5, 3, whatever many years from now, commuting is down 30%, why isn't that on the tax roll? Why isn't it being used for something that could be new and interesting green space? I mean, we can go on that. That's my personal opinion. Architecture, I would rely solely on someone who's equipped, such as yourself and the board, who certainly knows far more than I do.
Yeah, I think my personal view on it, right, is that the pavement around the train station, the commuter lot, is ultimately not the highest and best use of that land. And that, you know, when I look into the future, I don't see that commuter parking lot remaining untouched for the next 30, 40 years, right? And that doesn't mean that it's going to change in the next 3 to 4 years, but I think that we're, you know, trying to ideally look out that far into the future and to create the kind of zoning ordinances, or, you know, now having pulled this back, you know, create the conditions where in the future there may be zoning changes that would allow for that kind of development to come in the future. And I think, you know, the reason that the first draft of the form-based code did not, include architectural styles around what a parking structure would look like. I mean, I read in the meeting minutes, and Sabrina addressed this, and I think she kind of hit the nail on the head, which is, I've always been of the mind that, whenever we get to a point where the town is ready to consider putting that that property up for sale, there's going to be such a larger process around what does that look like, and what do we want to actually see there, and involving the community in co-creating what that space is going to look like. Do we need to enlarge the civic space around town hall? Do we want to have mixed use buildings? Do we want to have multifamily housing? How many parking garages are going to be needed to support that? So I feel like there's such a larger process that would need to take place around that, that's sort of the reason that the first draft didn't go into that level of detail around the parking structures themselves. But I totally hear you on that it's not trivial to come up with what those standards would look like around a parking garage.
Right, even behind the stores that are in front of Bell, that big parking lot that was redone very nicely a few years ago. If that were to get a structured parking garage, that could be very large and visible. What would that look like, and how would that work?
I mean, I personally, Bob, think that land, in the parking lot should be taken out of the form-based code, because we haven't done that kind of look and figured out what the community wants and what the community needs and what parking would look like there. And to me, we have one owner of that property. It's actually a gift to the town to be able to, sit down and really figure out as a community what we would want there, which would include looking at, parking, green space, commercial space, residential space, civic space. It could include everything. And I think until we can really sit down as a community to figure out what that should be, we can't possibly include that in a form-based code, or even, certainly look at architectural standards for it, because there's just too much work to be done, I think, there before we could even approach looking at that.
Heights, does any of the members of the board want to express any views on the heights of buildings, 5 stories, 4 stories in town? Nobody. So, I mean, for me, 5 stories is pretty tall. I mean, I'm a developer, and I'm used to playing the other side of the coin, trying to stuff the envelope, and I understand that. But it is very tall for what could be a narrow corridor. I think the North Greeley corridor that you spoke last week, excuse me, at the board meeting about being the first case study for development. I think it's a good pick. I think it's certainly a strip that's ripe for development and doesn't seem to be in people's way, except for the one multifamily development that you referenced.
So Bob,
Yeah, I think
sorry, Stanley, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I just to jump in real quick, I mean, I agree with Bob. The 5 stories is kind of out of scale for the size of the street. And what does a 5-story building mean? Does it mean a 5-story walk up for residents up there? I think 3 stories is more appropriate, and maybe a 4th story setback, just to get the height and get the floor area that a developer might want. But I think, 4 stories plus a setback is way too big. And it also begs the question, are those buildings going to have elevators too, which takes up floor area?
And with that, Stanley, I addressed this at last week's town board meeting as well, just addressing the different zones and where I think it's appropriate to have a 3-story with a 4th story setback, because I personally don't think that it's appropriate to have that at the corner of King and Greeley. Like, those buildings are at a max 3 stories, probably not even 3 stories. But in any event, like, I agree with you, Stanley. Like, for me, I think that level at that highest high would be appropriate somewhere that perhaps it is North Greeley, but again, like, I would like to see what it looks like on a model to see if it does affect neighbors or neighborhoods for that matter. If it blocks people's vistas, if it blocks their views, I would be concerned with that. Furthermore, as it relates to the train station, I know the train station is not really on the table right now, but if it were something that was on like along Washington Avenue, that feels good to me as it relates to just where the slope is on King Street and et cetera, et cetera. So I personally do not feel comfortable with something that's more than 3 stories on like the King Street Hill, or even, where Walgreens is currently, and where the 91 Bedford. I think that height at 91 Bedford is appropriate for that zone. But again, like, I think it's really critical with the form-based code that we address certain zones that make sense. And I really like how Malta did this, because they had, a certain zone that was, a purple zone, that this was the downtown parade neighborhood where buildings couldn't go beyond 2 stories or 3 stories. And then there was a zone where it was, condos that went up to 4 stories. So again, like, it's really about looking at the map and the modeling to make sure that everything fits together, because it's really difficult to visualize those things right now.
You got to think about sunlight and how that, the narrow corridors and how's the sunlight going to be when you want it to be a nice promenade for people to walk down the street, and sunlight's important.
And also, as it relates to transparency, like a lot of buildings, it's also really critical to make sure that there's enough glass there and it's not just one, I'm sure a lot of folks have seen like the Dia Beacon, like those really modern museums where they're just concrete boxes. We certainly don't want that to happen like in downtown Chappaqua. So that's another thing to add to the code.
If I may, I'm just keeping one eye on the clock, and I know that we've got a hard stop at 7, and there was something else that Jill wanted us to be able to address before then. But just before we wrap up, I'm just looking back at my notes about the things we were going to cover. And I just wanted to see, Bob, if you had any more color for us with regard to the landmark designation and the issues that you raised with regard to Gray Williams' letter on that.
I should have had the letter in front of me, remember. Stanley, you were more into that, familiar than I was, I think. Maybe if you want to comment. But I think some of the buildings, we didn't, in some levels we're being careful on development. I think we're speaking about being a little trepidation on some of the new development, but some of the buildings, are they really worth saving? Maybe something newer and nicer can be better, and we're holding on to something for that maybe isn't worth holding on to as much. So I don't think that every building is worthy of being landmarked. I think, a few of them, it's nice to have some history in the town. Some of them are, have a reason for being, maybe if they're not even beautiful architecturally. Some of them have nice detail. But some of them, when you really walk around the downtown and you look at some of the details, are you really going to be, could something replace it that's nicer? And I think the answer sometimes is yes.
Right.
Yeah,
I totally hear you on that. I had a similar reaction to the list of properties.
And part of the strategy should be, if there's a historic building, again, and I bring this up, is how do you make that relevant for the future? That could mean you allow for an addition to it. It could get a second story. It could get a second story or third story that's completely modern, let's say, in contrast with the historic base. I mean, things like that are typical in the city, where you can't just stifle a building into the use that it was in the 1800s or early 1900s. And you have to make it relevant for the future, and that's what I keep harping on. So yes, we can keep some of these historic parts of the building, but I think we have to allow that building to expand and grow back or grow up.
And some of them are in the best location for possible redevelopment. They're in prominent locations, so then you're holding yourself back if you take all of them and keep them all.
Yeah.
If I can just add one thing before we close up, or a couple really quickly. So people understand the parking lot behind the stores on Greeley, it's not just our property. That's school property. It's not as if the town could just sell all of that and build it out, even if it wanted to. It's shared property, if you will. Number two, as many people have said already, I think that the tiered idea, especially if any concern about blocking line of sight on a 4th story or even a 3rd story at times, can be beneficial. That's something that obviously is in your wheelhouse more than ours. And then last but not least, I just wanted to add, when I was talking about the train station in 3, 4, 7 years, I'm not talking about developing it then. My point was having an opportunity to have conversations down the road where you want to go. So that's about it. Thank you.
All right, well, we thank you for giving us an opportunity to meet with you and work with you. And, we would like to be an asset for the community, and we, like to be more involved, even with the town board, as, visible projects in the community are thought of and talked about. We like to help, and, so we're here as an asset for you.
That's great. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. And we didn't even get to hear from everybody. And so I'm just grateful that everybody was on. And like I said, I've actually been pouring through your minutes because I found them tremendously helpful. And the conversations that you guys have been having are really rich and really insightful. So I know we're going to be able to mine that for some good feedback to our consultants as they work on the next version of the form-based code. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Y'all.
Good night, all.
So can we hopscotch over to the moratorium discussion? Because I've got to let Sabrina go to her planning board meeting at 7.
Great.
Nick, Sabrina, who wants to start
Sure,
this?
I'll start us off on it. So
Thank you.
as you may recall, the town's moratorium expires in June 15th, I believe, on or about, and it includes the entire what's attached to that local law as the downtown study area. And although you continue with the study area for the purposes of secret review, the DGEIS, you have indicated that you're going to limit the evaluation of the areas that would be rezoned. And under the law, moratoriums are only to preserve the status quo and to allow you to do a study, and while you're doing that study, maintain the status quo. So if the intent is not to proceed with an adoption of the form-based code in all of that downtown area that was examined and included in the moratorium, then it would be appropriate for the town board to, if you will, terminate the moratorium with respect to those areas that would no longer be subject to this potential rezoning that you're studying as part of the legislative function. You can still continue, and it's appropriate to continue with the secret, but on the legislative side, if you have no intention at the present of doing so, then you should narrow the moratorium. The moratorium local law we drafted allows that you can do that by resolution. Even though it's a local law, you don't need to hold a public hearing to reduce that area. You can do it by a resolution. So for us to prepare that resolution, we need to know and discuss what is the area to be studied. And I can pull up from the DGEIS some of the relevant pages that would help inform that discussion.
Well, if I may, so in the previous moratorium, it covered lands within the business retail, business retail parking, and the IG zoning districts. You are now taking a portion of the business retail zoning district, from, let's say, the King Greeley intersection up to whatever that street is, or just beyond that street as currently identified, and calling that the area of the proposed legislation or the area of your moratorium.
So I think my hesitation is, I feel like part of the challenge, right, is that we've identified that we want to focus on North Greeley. And in doing so, I haven't sat down with a map and looked actually parcel by parcel to say this is in, this is out, this is in, this is out. And I feel like I'm not entirely confident of doing that, because I think that what's in and what's out is also dependent upon the the comments that we received during the public hearing and the public comment process, and the secret review that we're continuing to move through. So, part of my challenge is, right, that I'm just not knowledgeable enough yet to say yes to these parcels and no to these parcels with a really fine chisel at this point. I know that I want to focus on North Greeley, but I'm still waiting to get some answers before I know exactly the ins and the outs of each parcel. And so I guess I'm sort of wondering, do we have to know with that level of specificity, or can we say, okay, North Greeley, you're still in, and the rest of you, we're going to release you, and get finer, more granular definition as we learn more and know more.
You could, Ivy, do it that way in terms of the broader map I put up. You could narrow that down so you encompass the general area and then have more specific discussions. So, for example, you're going to remove Upper Greeley because that's not in the area. That the train station parking lot is not within that area. So you can have a resolution that removes those, but you don't draw the finer line until you'd have an opportunity to have a discussion, if that's what the intent is. So at least that way it allows you to remove some of those areas now, and then you can have a discussion to more accurately define it.
So Nick, does that mean that essentially you'd be taking everything, let's say from the street corner north, and it would be currently still subject to the moratorium, and everything else would be released from the moratorium, you know, with an asterisk that the properties, that there may be properties, you know, that are included in the moratorium that could get refined at a later date and subsequently excluded?
Yes, I mean, we still need to discuss where we're going to draw the line, but it would be with a wider crayon, if you will, wider marker, so we have a broader line until we can fine tune it and get out the.
Right.
The
Yeah,
specifics.
I support that idea because we will likely refine it further. But at least we can do something in the short term that is release a whole lot of property.
Right, because what I'm putting up on the screen now is the black and white edges. That is the study area. Let me reduce it. So you see the scope of a study area is broader, so we can certainly bring it, narrow it in.
And Nick, just to confirm, you can have a moratorium is not related necessarily to a form-based code. It's related to studying the zoning, correct? If you think you may rezone, you can put a moratorium on it, even if it doesn't have to be related to a form-based code necessarily, correct?
No, form-based code is just another name for zoning ordinance. It's a specific type as opposed to the Euclidean zoning. So, right, the moratorium is to preserve the status quo while you consider rezoning. Form-based code is just the particular type of rezoning that would occur.
Okay.
So you're correct. You can have a moratorium, and we've had moratoriums in the past, and they're used by municipalities in Westchester and throughout the state. So
in general, I would encourage us to exclude the corner lots, but but I would be comfortable with including them for the time being while we get information back.
So what the board may want to do is take a look at in the form-based code itself. There's a number of slides, and I put them up on the screen. If you go to page 23, you'll see this master key, if you will. We have references to what are called tile numbers. And we're looking at really tiles 1 and 3, which are pages 24 and 26. You see 24 gives you the outline of the area that would be rezoned to a new zone that would include form-based code zoning text. And then 26 is the other slide that comes up to the intersection of North Greeley and King and Lower King Street. Right. And that's where we need to talk about where we're going to draw the line.
Correct.
So I can work, Sabrina, and I can work on sort of taking the first crack at drawing that.
Great.
I'm
Yeah, I
volunteering,
mean,
Sabrina.
if you guys can come up with that language and the draft of the resolution, and then maybe we can advance it at our next meeting, I think that's great. But I think, I think the idea is the right idea, and I think it's the right step to take at this point to, further signal to the community our intention to focus on North Greeley at this point.
But just to confirm, you're asking us to release properties, not to keep properties.
Yes.
Yes.
We would need on June 15th, we would need to renew the moratorium. The moratorium already goes through June 15th. It's just a matter of wanting to, since we've now signaled the new direction with regard to the form-based code, and we are no longer pursuing rezoning for, South Greeley and for the King Street Hill and for the top of King Street, to be able to release those from the moratorium would, I think be appropriate at this time, was what Nick and Ed, I spoke to.
Yes.
Even if a lot of those
Just for the
properties
record, I'm not agreeing to I still think the form-based code should just not be there at all. But I do believe that we should be looking at rezoning, but not necessarily in conjunction with a form-based code.
Right, and so the moratorium doesn't really affect the examination of areas under legislation consideration. The moratorium is a tool that you all have employed to prevent drastic changes while you're considering legislation. And so by limiting the moratorium, you're releasing the other areas who can still be subject to zoning change. Unlikely, but we're still studying it. But it's really focusing on where you are targeting your zoning legislation to be written.
Correct. I was just saying that Ivy just mentioned that we all agreed we're studying the form.
I didn't say that we all, I didn't say we all agreed. I said that the town board is pursuing that as a direction. I mean, the zoning change that we're considering is the zoning change related to the form-based code.
Right. So I'm definitely up for still looking at rezoning.
You're opposed to looking at rezoning.
No, I am in favor of looking at rezoning. Up for, I said. In favor of looking at rezoning, just not under a form-based code scenario.
So I guess the question at hand, though, is, are you in favor of releasing the moratorium on the properties?
Yes.
Excluded from the limitation?
Yeah, that's why I asked if that's what we were going to be asked to vote upon.
So Sabrina and I will prepare that initial cut, if you will, with the understanding that it will need further refinement and there will be subsequent discussions about where those lines get drawn.
Right. Great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Everyone have a good night.
Bye, Sabrina. Thank you.
Bye, Sabrina.
Bye.
So we actually have a public hearing and the police reform starting at 7 now. So I see we've got a number of our police reform members who've joined us for tonight. So I think we're gonna hopscotch over to our police reform reinvention collaboration committee recommendations. Jeremy, are you going to?
Yeah. Well, you know what we should maybe do is have Carrie see, we can pull up the PowerPoint. I can go through that. I think that may just be the easiest for the public. I can breeze through it.
Sure.
All right. So thank you, Carrie. I appreciate that. So for those of you who are not familiar, and those of you who are, for the past many weeks and months, we've been working on the police reform and reinvention collaborative committee. We put this together to follow the governor's mandate to look at our own local police department as to things that can change. Additionally, we've just by default looked at it at a higher level, including the county and the state. If I could have the first slide, please, or the next one. So on 12th of this past year, Governor Andrew Cuomo signed the New York State Executive Order 203, requiring local governments in New York State to adopt a policing reform plan by April of this year, April 1st. In response to comply with that executive order, the following steps have been taken here in the town of Newcastle. Go to the second slide, the next slide. Here in the town of Newcastle, our work on the police reform began prior to the governor's executive order, and we were fortunate in launching our PRRCC to be able to build on the foundation of activities that started in the summer of 2020 with the creation of the Newcastle Council on Race and Equity, also known as the CRE. The CRE was formed in the aftermath of the police-involved murder of George Floyd, and also in response to a series of racist incidents in this community. The CRE created an action plan to increase racial justice and equity in Newcastle by looking across all aspects of our civic life and institutions, including policing. The work of the CRE to develop recommendations to improve community police interactions was a launch pad for the PRRCC, and several CRE volunteers continued their service on this committee. In addition, the Newcastle Town Board held a community forum with Police Chief James Carroll to review police policies and procedures and engage residents in June of last year. On Tuesday, October 20th, the Town Board approved a resolution creating the Newcastle Police Reform Reinvention Collaborative Committee, appointing 12 members, and then later at a date when we realized we wanted more and to be more inclusive, on November 17, 2020, we adopted 7 more additional members. Next slide, please. So those committee members that we have, I'm involved, obviously, Chief Carroll, Jill Shapiro, Ivy Poole, Robert Deary, Christine Ackerman, Anthony Rotolo, Hermione Charles, Martha Jacobs, Frank Lewis, Vince Canziani, Harvey Loeb, Craig Davenport, Joanna Robinson Nair, Angela Bonner-Helm, Kimberly Carey, Purcell Welsh, Carlos Ramirez, and Darren Nair. I will say also that it can't be without said that Tiffany and Carrie were instrumental in making this all happen, even though they're not listed on there. So thank you very much. If I can have the next slide, please. I won't go through this, but you can see that we met numerous times to discuss our thoughts and put this all together. Next slide, please. Next slide, Carrie. All right, so the recommendations are broken down into a few different areas. Mental health, Office of the Community Advocate, Chiefs Advisory Board, community surveys, the role of the town board, tracking demographics on traffic stops, posting of key departmental policies on the Newcastle Police Department website, and recommendations that we didn't necessarily start here, but we wanted to see come from above to help us locally. Next slide, please. So did we skip one, Carrie? If you can go back to 1, is there number 1, or did we skip to number 2?
This is the revised presentation, Jeremy.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So
Yeah,
there,
Hang on, I'll call up the first one.
thank you. My apology. Thank you. So in terms of our recommendations for mental health, we wanted to see additional crisis intervention training for mental health emergencies, especially in marginalized communities. The Newcastle Police Department intervention with Newcastle community members experiencing mental health emergencies will be guided by these principles. Maintaining the health and safety of the person experiencing the mental health emergency and those in the immediate location. Approaching the situation with the goal of being as helpful as possible. These are obvious, but it gets a little bit more detailed. Next slide, please. Our recommendation, I don't see it in here, but there was mention of actually having pods that we would have and hopefully be assisted by the county. That may be in a later slide so that we could have access to people who need it immediately. People in social work and other mental health fields can go into the field in addition to or with the police and have that set up in areas that it's accessible. So in other words, if you're here in Newcastle, not necessarily one solely in this area, but one that could service multiple areas, even on the west end, it may be best with Ossining. On this end, it may be best with North Castle. So we, if you can go to the next slide, please. One of the big issues that we were dealing with was the Office of the Community Advocate. And this is not the slide that we ultimately stayed with, but there was conversation about how we can assist and make those who don't feel comfortable making complaints do so when it involves the Newcastle Police Department. Anonymous complaints we wanted to keep, but we also wanted to encourage residents to be able to have an advocate who can speak on their behalf, who can meet with the police and can help them in case they felt uncomfortable. And ultimately, we wanted to see those advocates, if possible, enable those people who would otherwise not make a complaint or felt that they needed to do it anonymously, to do it in a way that they could get closure and the police department can thoroughly investigate and resolve those issues. So the big piece here was now there would be a liaison for members of the community to communicate their concerns or their complaints with the police department. Could I have the next slide, please? We also discussed the creation of a Chiefs Advisory Board. The Newcastle Police Department's Chiefs Advisory Board serves to improve the image and reputation of the Newcastle Police Department and promote transparency and trust between our police department and the citizens of Newcastle. The Chief's Advisory Board will consist of members of the community and organizations and should be actively engaged in improving the quality of life in Newcastle. Board members should have an interest in assisting the Chief of Police and our police department in identifying best practices and offering advice to the chief on those matters that will improve transparency and build trust within the community. Board members are asked to provide their perspectives on the possible impact of certain police policies, practices, training, and programs. This feedback is instrumental in providing the Newcastle Police Department with the type of objective input needed to ensure that its missions continue to focus on the most current policing standards and the cultivation of community partnership. The board's involvement helps our police department avoid the implementation or continuation of programs, policies, or initiatives contrary to its overall mission and core values. Next slide, please. The PRRCC, believes that periodic community surveys would be beneficial in tracking goals, determining trends, and creating a new goal vis-a-vis the interactions and relationships between the BIPOC, LGBTQ, and other marginalized communities and the police department. A useful and effective survey would include gathering basic data and information in order to identify areas for change or improvement, aid in determining the success of past strategies and highlighting the need for future actions in continuing to bring about racial equity, and enable the information to be shared among relevant groups. In order to accomplish this task, it is clear that surveys must be concise and specifically target information being solicited from the public. For this reason, and to benefit the fullest extent possible, the PRRCC has determined that a survey professional would be necessary to assist in creating, designing, and implementing these surveys so that we can get the best and most accurate information. Next slide, please. The role of the town board. The PRCC finds that improvements in the police oversight can benefit the community and the police department itself. Increased cooperation between the community and the police department and heightened transparency regarding the police practices and processes will advance the police department's goal of engaging in community policing. One way to do so is through the town board, and we would be reviewing Newcastle Police Department. And when I say we, not just this town board, but future town boards. As elected officials, town board members are committed to ensuring that the Newcastle Police Department is accountable to the community. As civilians, the board can give a voice to the community's concerns. In addition, as police commissioners, the town board is engaged in reviewing the details of investigations and disciplinary proceedings. So what are our recommendations? Hold semi-annual audit review meetings with the chief of police to analyze performance. We recommend that the new police department develop the key performance indicators for the department for publication on the town website. Using this as a framework, we recommend holding semi-annual meetings between the town board and the police chief to review departmental performance and discuss activity over the past 6 months. Through these public meetings, the town board can help educate the community about the responsibilities of the police department and to increase the public's understanding of law enforcement policies and procedures. Next, please. Tracking demographics at traffic stops. It is a recommendation that we seek to obtain demographic information regarding the drivers involved in vehicle stops by our police officers that do not result in issuance of traffic tickets. We seek to gather information to gauge the officer's perception of the driver along these lines: race, gender, age, and ethnicity. And to be clear, it's not asking the driver, how do you identify? But instead it's asking the officer to make the determination as what they perceive that person to be, because it is those perceptions that many times matter most. Based upon the research conducted by the committee and contained in the background document entitled Traffic Stop Data Collection, we believe that the Chief's Advisory Board is in the best position to determine the method of data collection. We expect that this board to use these studies as a guide to engage consultants to determine the process of data collection and the analysis of this data. Next, please. Seems pretty obvious, but posting of key departmental policies on the website. Can I have the next one, please?
I'm just going to switch over to the county items.
And on that as well, we had the change, I think, on one of the other areas as well. So when I mentioned before, I don't have to go through it again, but I mentioned in the previous slide how we took that office of the advocate to allow for it to continue with anonymous complaints, but to try to encourage a way to actually not make it that way so that both the complainant and the police department could do their job and find closure one way or another. All right, recommendations to the county. The creation of a 211 mental health resource and increase the availability of mental health pods throughout Westchester County. We strongly advocate for the creation of a 211 system to provide a centralized resource for residents of Westchester County for mental health related questions and issues. This number would provide access to information, services available, and assistance to family, friends, and individuals experiencing mental health issues. And this obviously would be in lieu at times of a 911 call when the police would not be necessary. Ideally, this 211 resource would work in conjunction with the mental health pods I briefly discussed. The county has created a mental health pods in some municipalities to provide mental health professionals to respond with the police when appropriate on 911 calls, to provide mental health resources to the community, and to help divert mental health incidents away from the police so that the police don't have to get involved at all. Next, please. Mental health pods should be employed throughout the county with centralized locations to allow for effective dispatch to appropriate situations to assist local police when callers identify the emergency as involving a mental health issue. Much like ALS services dispatched by proximity to call, mental health pods would be dispatched to calls where needed. We need more of these, and that's why it needs to come from the county to fund and to organize. We recognize the increasing need for mental health professionals to be the first point of contact with the police on many 911 calls. We further recognize that despite additional training available to the police in de-escalation, other tactics to address mental health issues encountered, police officers are not, with few exceptions, mental health professionals. We believe the creation of a 211 system coupled with the increased availability of mental health pods throughout the county will go a long way in properly addressing mental health issues routinely encountered by the police. Extended period of probation, not probation if you get into trouble, but probation in terms of police officers who join a police department. We join in the county in its recommendation to extend the period of probation for new officers. Next slide, please. Another recommendation is body cameras or body cams. We would support funding to enable our police to have body cams. We would be looking for funding to cover the cost of the camera, but as well as the servers to store that information for however long that they're needed, and the software to catalog it so that it's easily accessible. Once we obtain the funding to provide body cameras to all officers, we would promulgate rules for the appropriate use of the cams by our officers, for example, when it should be turned on and turned off and how it should be used. Next, please. Education, again, coming from the county and the state. In addition to the recommendation to extend the period of probation for new officers and that oversight by our police department, it is recommended that the curriculum of the police academy be expanded. We strongly urge the Division of Criminal Justice Services to retain a curriculum specialist to recommend adequate training for additional subjects and the appropriate training time for each. This additional coursework would include, but wouldn't be limited to, recognizing and appropriately addressing mental health issues, cultural sensitivity, recognizing bias, and procedural justice. We further recommend that these subjects be incorporated into ongoing annual training, so it's not just a one-shot deal, recognizing that it's an ongoing learning process. Last, we understand that these requests and recommendations have a real financial impact to the local municipalities that bear the cost of both training the police at the academy and additional field training ongoing on an annual basis. We'll be looking to the county and state for increased funding to make these recommendations a reality. And one thing that I will share that we discussed back and forth was whether or not we believed and we supported the concept of a police officer having a 4-year college degree as a mandatory requirement. And we looked at that in conjunction with other issues such as life experience, military, and whatever experience would be relevant to policing. So in a nutshell, although albeit a little bit long, that is what we have been doing over the past weeks and months to put this together. It's really been a team effort. Sometimes we sparred, sometimes we agreed collectively, but it's our product, and I'm certainly proud of it, and all the people that did their part and made this happen. And if anyone wants to share any comment or thoughts, feel free to do so. All right. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. And that is where we are, and that's what we've completed.
Jeremy, I have a question, and maybe this is a question for the chief. First of all, what a tour de force, and obviously the product of a phenomenal collaboration and some vigorous discussions. Certainly, some of the ones that I witnessed were vigorous and insightful, and ultimately, I think, very productive based on where you landed. I have a question about the dispatch of a mental health professional to a crisis, and really what we think would logistically be required to facilitate that in a timeline compatible with a crisis, if it's a county dispatched resource, and then the role of the police officer in those situations. Like, do we envision an interaction that doesn't involve a police officer, or is this someone who accompanies the police officer, or the police officer gets to the site first? I'm just curious about the practical implementation of that resource. I'm fully understanding, I think the mission and value of it.
I think initially, at least, and I think Chief should be on the line here somewhere, but I think initially the idea of the 211 call is a call that is not an emergency that would require the police. So my understanding would be separate and apart, as opposed to 911 call where there may be a mental health provider who comes with or after the fact. This would be pushing the police aside, if you will, or just not directing it to the police and having the first responder be a mental health professional. But that's also why we've asked the county and state, say, you need to fund this. You need to provide it in close proximity. It can't be 3 throughout the county, because you're right, it could take an hour to get there, and then the emergency is gone, and it can go from bad to worse. So if each municipality, or at least joining areas, as I said before, it wouldn't be necessarily one in Newcastle. It could be one on the west end, so that Austin and Newcastle, and one on the east end could be North Castle and Newcastle, to take advantage of it. But I think Chief should be on this call somewhere.
See him.
Yeah, I'm here as well.
Oh, you are? Great.
Yep.
Great.
Like Jeremy said, I think if the call comes to us or comes through 911, we're definitely going to respond. If it's not an emergency, I think we would stay and wait and, for the mental health professional to come. If it was an emergency and there was a danger to them or the person, we would stay there with them and assist in any way we could. That's kind of the idea behind it. They used to have mobile crisis teams in the past, and we almost want to reinstate that. Sometimes the call will go directly to them, and based on how it's explained to them, they would call us for us to come as well, and certainly could.
Is there a scenario where a mental health professional would show up to a home without a police officer?
I guess it certainly could happen, especially after some of the reform that's happened out there. But I guess it's a sense of severity of it. What kind of crisis are they in? Is it something, a breakdown, or just depression, or are they looking to hurt themselves or someone else?
There's so many things, Lori, obviously, that have to come into play. You have to train the person on the 211 call to know or identify if the police should be called, because just because someone doesn't want the police there doesn't mean they shouldn't be. Or maybe the police come and they have to obviously secure the situation beforehand. So there's just so many things that play, and education is a huge component of this, so that the right decisions can be made, and then accessibility, because if it's too far away, the whole purpose is shot.
Sure. And presumably, I guess that same 211 resource, could direct people to resources that are not in person, right? Whether it's like telephone support or redirecting to. other, local tools that they could apply to their issue. Okay, this is super exciting, and everyone involved should be really proud of their work.
And I will add one thing, it would be very easy for Chief Carroll and Officer Detective Rotolo, anyone in the Newcastle Police Department who was there to think that this was on them or be defensive, but that certainly wasn't the case. Officer Davenport, all of the officers who were involved did not look at it that way. They were very accepting and open, and it shows that we have a very good relationship, but we always can do better. We always can look at ways to make things go in the right process and that everyone's protected and the right response is appropriate.
Can I speak for a moment?
Please go ahead.
Okay, it's Martha Jacobs. One of the things that came up was actually from a member of the community who said it would have been more helpful, and he was actually on the receiving end of when a call came out at some point, and to have someone who was a mental health professional and not a police officer showing up at his door with a gun, and that tended to escalate things instead of helping the person who had the mental health issue. And I think that's a really important thing for us to just keep in mind. And I know families sometimes are at their wits' end and don't know what to do, and do the best they can. And I think if there is a 211 line that people can call, I think that will go a long way toward helping, particularly those who have mental health issues, and to help their families to be able to help them, especially when they're in a crisis.
Thank you, Martha. Anyone else want to share anything? Otherwise, I think we are done with this piece. So
I'll just say thank you again on behalf of the town board for all of the volunteers from the community who assisted us with this effort. It was arduous and intense. And I feel like we're almost like a little family now. We've all spent so much time together, and it was really great. So I'm really super appreciative. And I also just want to thank and recognize you, Jeremy, as our leader. It was at times, I think, like herding cats, but you did a great job as the cat herder and keeping us on track and leading the effort. It was intensive on your end as well. So thank you for stepping up and playing that role.
Well, thank you, but I think it was everyone doing their part. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. It's really just that simple. Even if it's not simple, it's just that simple. Everyone doing their part. So thank you, everybody. And
before we move away from this, if I could, and that is maybe we should open it up to public comment. If any members of the public have any comment on our report, we'd love to hear it.
Anyone's interested in speaking, you raise your digital hand, or you can type into the chat box.
All right, I don't see any hands.
I don't see anyone.
Yes,
If you're on the phone and you want to raise your hand, dial *9.
All right, I think we're all right. Thank you.
Then,
Bill.
yeah, we're just going to ask the board later on in our meeting to adopt the recommendations. Let's see. To adopt the recommendations and submit them to the state and let them know that we have that we're on our way. Thank you all.
Great. All right. I'll see you all next Thursday on Zoom. I can't wait.
It's gonna be lonely now.
Next week?
We don't. No, we don't. We don't. If you want to, we could.
Nice to see you. Let's go for a drink when everything opens up. Okay.
Sounds good.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Have a good night.
Bill, back to you. Thank you, Purcell.
Okay, so the next thing on our agenda is the public hearing for the acquisition of 220-230 Joan Corwin Way. And many thanks to Bart, who's had a very, very long day and continues to have a very long day. Amanda, are you gonna introduce this for us?
Okay, good evening, everyone. Amanda McGowan, I'm town attorney with Nick Ward Willis at Keenan Bean. Just going to go through an overview of the acquisition of portions of 220 and 230 Joan Corwin Way, the subject property of tonight's public hearing. So the town previously engaged in negotiating a sale of the property, and since it's been ongoing, they've been unable to obtain an agreement on price. And that is the preferred method of obtaining the property. However, if we do come to an agreement, the eminent domain proceeding will be discontinued. But at this time, we're going to continue with the eminent domain proceeding, and the town complied with the notice provisions by publishing a notification in the Journal News, by sending a notice to the property owner's representative, and by providing documents for review at Town Hall. In tonight's agenda packet, you should have a copy of the notice of the public hearing, a copy of the public use report prepared by Bart, including some exhibits such as the acquisition map, the aerial photographs showing the neighboring properties, which are the existing DPW and highway facilities, and some photographs of the limitations on the existing facilities. And the purpose of tonight's meeting is to open the public hearing and discuss the proposed acquisition, the proposed public use, and you'll hear from our Commissioner of DPW, Bart Carey. He'll go through the property, the facilities, and some of the equipment that the town will need, and kind of identify why it's a key property in terms of location as well as the facilities. And then after closing the public hearing, the board will need to make a determination and adopt a report and findings outlining a criteria of the eminent domain procedure law, which includes specifying the public use, benefit, and purpose, the approximate location and reasons for the selection of that location, why not another property, for instance, and the general effect of any impacts. As an unlisted action, we prepared an EAF Part 1 and need to make a determination of significance, whether there are any impacts. And the board has 90 days after the close of the public hearing to make a determination, issue its findings. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Bart Carey.
I'm actually going to stop you for a moment, Amanda. Why don't we have a motion to open our public hearing? Ivy, could I impose upon you?
You want me to move to open the public hearing? Sure. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm just going to ask whether or not Mr. Lucchese, the administrator of the property, or his representative and attorney is present and would like to speak. Just looking at the participants. Not seeing any.
And to be clear, he was noticed obviously of this.
Oh, yes, yes. And we have spoken to him. We are going to ask the board not to close the public hearing tonight, and we will be keeping it open for 2 weeks for any additional comments that might come in. Nick, at this point, we'll ask Bart. Is there anything you want to add before we turn it over to Bart?
No, I think we're good with Bart giving us his public use report.
Okay, Bart Carey, our Commissioner of Public Works. Thanks for joining us, Bart.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me the time to discuss this opportunity for the town. Just wanted to say the Department of Public Works has been cramped in space in the present quarters that we have for quite some time. The big limitation that we have is on indoor storage space. We could definitely use a little bit more land, but the opportunity presented here with this building is really critical for us. We have a large fleet of vehicles, and the majority of them are stored outside, which affects the service life of the equipment and the ability to have that equipment in use to rapidly respond to emergencies such as weather, water main breaks, fallen trees, and on and on. So it's definitely a need for indoor garage space for our trucks. We have about 20 trucks that we use for snow plowing, and currently we're able to get 5 of those trucks indoors. So those trucks that we are able to get indoors, if we know there's snow coming, we can load them with salt and whatnot so that they're ready to go out. As we all know, the weather forecast is helpful, but not always accurate. So sometimes we try to always get here before the snow starts, but that doesn't always happen. So, we like to have the trucks loaded and ready to go. If we had more trucks inside with salt on them ready to go, that increases our ability to respond during storms. And that's, in the winter and for other types of emergencies as well, for water main breaks. And like I said, trees down, those are big examples. We have people who come to work in the middle of the night. Sometimes it's much safer for them to go get a truck that's inside in a lit area rather than outside, and getting out to their job assignments. So it would just be overall much more efficient for us to have more indoor storage space for these vehicles. We also have a number of vehicles that need to be in heated space. We have a water jet truck that we use year round to clear sewer blockages and do maintenance that has to be kept in heated space. We have other vehicles as well that have water. We have a street sweeper, asphalt roller that we have to winterize because they are kept outside. So we have been looking at this property next door to us for some time. I would say actually probably I became aware of it shortly after I started working for the town 18 years ago at that point. So there are, as we all know from the discussion, industrial sites. There is a shortage of industrial space in town. This property is industrial space. It is right next to our current facility and is actually in between our recycling facility. So we own the property on either side of it, and then it is also next to the Sawmill River Parkway and the Metro North railroad tracks. We have found no other facilities that are nearby to our facility that would be usable for a comparable purpose that we need this for. And Carrie, could you put up the map now? We have some exhibits. Okay. So this is the property here. And it's between 2 of the town properties. It's industrial zoning, bordered by the Parkway and Metro North. And we would only be looking to acquire the portion that we need. So there is a flag lot that would be created that would go up to the cell tower facilities that are up a steep slope and located in the rear of the property. That equipment is not needed by us. We have no interest in that. The lower portion with the building and the property there is what we are looking to obtain. So the lots would be redrawn so that we would only take what we need. One other thing I wanted to mention too, as well, is this building is a much higher in height than our existing facilities. We have some pictures that will show next that will illustrate this. But right now we are very restricted in the plow trucks that we buy. The 5 trucks that do go inside, the door height on those garage doors is only 10 foot 6 inches. So our trucks are custom built just to fit inside of there. Standard door height now is 12 feet. The building also houses equipment. It has a jib crane and a bridge crane that we could use for prefabricating water main break repair parts inside of the building. And so we would also see cost savings on vehicles by storing them inside. We would expect to get another year or 2 of life out of the equipment just by keeping inside. There's a lot of wear and tear when the trucks are stored outside and they're started in the cold weather. It takes them a long time to warm up. They have central hydraulics, most of these trucks, for the dumps and the plows, which is a large hydraulic oil tank, and it takes a long time for that to warm up to operate properly. So there would be a savings shown by extending the life of the equipment that we have. So if we could look at the pictures, Carrie, would you mind putting those up? So this is our existing facility. This is a plow truck that is inside, and it just fits under the garage door to get inside. If you could just slowly scroll through these. So they're very tight next to each other. That kind of shows like where that yellow light is on top of the dump, that it just fits under the garage door. You'll see that in the next couple of pictures as well. The mirrors just literally fit in by inches to get these trucks inside. So one of the things we have to do quite frequently, especially, you could just stop there for a second. When it snows a lot, is the snow plow blades need to be changed on the trucks, and the plows are very difficult to get inside of these bays because the plows are even wider. So we're restricted in the spot where we could do that. Otherwise, we're doing it outside in the weather, which is definitely not ideal. If you could just scroll through some more. I think there's just some other pictures of equipment that we have outside that we use for clearing sidewalks. That stays outside. There's more stuff outside. The one on the right is a brine truck, and these trucks are outside all year long. There's more trucks. Those are plow trucks and sanders outside. And that's a view to the north, looking down. So just to go through again, you know, it's industrial property. We don't see any impacts to any of the neighbors that are there now because we are the neighbors basically, and the other neighbors further down the street would not be impacted. We wouldn't have any people working in the building all day long, so that, you know, there's no added employees over what we have now. So there wouldn't be any increased traffic on the road. We wouldn't really be looking to do any work on the site as far as making changes now. Probably to the building, we would have to do some stuff inside. It was constructed in 2 phases. The north building has a dirt floor still. It was never completely finished, so we need to put a concrete floor in there and do some work in there. So really, we have found no other suitable facilities nearby. This property is in an ideal location, and we have been looking at it, and it's location in real estate, and this is the perfect opportunity for us. So we would appreciate the board pursuing this. We would be hopeful that the owner would come to terms with the town, but you know, the condemnation needs to happen, and that is needed for us at this point.
Thank you, Barton. Thank you, Bart. And I apologize. I should have mentioned this in the beginning. This is a little bit of a different format tonight because the board has to make this report and findings. So Amanda presented you sort of with the overview of the legal structure. And then we asked Bart to provide testimony because if this goes to trial, there needs to be certain facts that are stated during this hearing. And Bart, as the superintendent of DPW, is in the better position to do so. And that's why we had Bart go through those exhibits, which he aptly did. And as Bart mentioned, this is an important key piece of property because the town owns the land on either side of the property. So it's a logical extension of it. But that is really a presentation that needs to be made tonight to satisfy the eminent domain proceeding law and demonstrate to the public and also the property owner that there is a public use that is being set forth as the purpose for the acquisition of this property. So that concludes the presentation. Now it should be open to the public or the property owner, if he is present, to ask any questions or make any comments.
So we'll take anybody in the audience on the call who'd like to make a public comment. You can raise your digital hand to do so. So I see we have Frank Cupper.
Frank, you just need to unmute yourself. Okay, I have two Franks raising their hand to say up. One of them is unmuted. You can speak now.
Yeah, my name is Nick Lucchese. Can you hear me?
We're having some trouble hearing you. We can hear that you're speaking, but we're having trouble making out what you're saying.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, much better.
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you for sharing that. I do have an interest in the property, but I have no comment at this time, but thank you for inquiring.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cupper. As we indicated earlier, we are going to be keeping the public hearing open. So as you have an opportunity to reflect on the conversation and the presentation that you heard tonight, if you do have further comment, you can certainly come back to our next public hearing, or you're also welcome to submit your comments to publiccomment@mynewcastle.org, and that will also enter them into the public record.
But you're going to still respond.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else who would like to speak? Again, you can raise your digital hand. And Carrie, I'll just check with you whether we had anyone on YouTube. Any questions come in?
I don't see anything now.
And Christina, our town clerk, I'll check with you and see whether we had any public comments come in.
No, we have not.
I think Mr. Cooper has his hand again. Hang on one moment.
Oh, great.
Just unmute yourself, please. You should be able to talk.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Nick Lucchese. My aunt owned that piece of property.
Mr. Lucchese.
How you doing?
It's still Shapiro. How are you, sir?
Oh, thanks. I got a friend that lives down there. You know, Chet Vogel?
Can you tell me?
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Cooper, we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you.
No, it's Nick Lucchese, not Frank.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Lucchese, your line is a little bit fuzzy.
I'm sorry about that. I'm not speaking loud enough for you. Am I speaking too loud?
You're not speaking too loud, but we're getting a lot of echo, like a lot of feedback, maybe.
Sometimes if you turn down your speaker in the background, that will help.
Okay. I'm sorry, because I'm Italian, I speak kind of loud, you know? Let's see here. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Let's try. Let's go for it and see how it goes.
Yeah, I wanted to say that my aunt owned that property, and I've been in that building quite a few times. I grew up in New York, and you know, like I say, I mean, you know, we probably would have sold that building a long time ago, but my uncle's up there in age now and stuff, and I don't think he's too motivated right now. But I see that you guys really need a property, but the existing building you have now, where your workers are now, why can't you add in and work on that property there and extend it?
So I think the question, Bart, was why can we not extend or add on to the existing DPW facilities without needing to acquire new property, if I understood correctly?
So the lot that we have now is pretty much built out. There is land that's owned by the state that is in between us and this property as well. But this parcel adjoins, it's in between, two of our parcels. So this is what has been identified as the ideal location to expand our facility. The current lot is not suitable for expansion.
And I think, Bart, as you've indicated also, the existing building, due to its location, provides for more storage of inside spaces, given the existence of the storage garage on the building, as well as the fact that that building has a crane or two cranes that you've indicated in your testimony and in the written report would be used and beneficial to the town's purposes. And I think you've indicated with the aerial photos that we provided in the report that the current use of the property is pretty tight with the storage of outside materials and equipment, and this will allow you to not only maintain but expand the better operationals in a safer manner as well. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Why can't you move to the left where the gas pumps are at? Well, how much land frontage you got there?
I'm sorry, again, we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you.
Well, I'm gonna have to straighten this out. You know what I'll do is I'll continue on to the next meeting when you guys have it. Maybe I can straighten this out.
I think I heard you say you're gonna try again at our next meeting.
Yes.
If you wanna leave us in the chat function, or if you wanna send an email to us with your email address, we can also send you some or your phone number. We can also send you some guidelines about how to make sure we have a good connection next time.
I could also give you a phone number if you want to try to dial in and speak.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Hold on one second.
Please. What's the number? What's the number?
Hold on one second, I'm getting it. Can you see the chat function? Because I'm going to put it into that.
Okay, that's it.
And you need to just put in this webinar ID that I'm putting in here now as well.
Well, I do have a list of numbers here. I can't see the number that you put on the screen. I'm sorry. Oh, Karen.
The number is 646-518-9805.
Take that again, please. I can't find a screen, but I got discontinued. 845 8574.
While we're waiting, Ivy, is there any other member of the public who wishes to speak?
While someone's reading that, Bart, to be clear, Bart, if you can you hear me, Bart?
Yes.
So the garage, you can't expand to the same extent, if at all, as to what the garage can accommodate. In other words, the garage can accommodate far more than anything you can do in terms of expanding.
The garage at 220 to 230 Joan Corwin Way, yes, could do more than we can expand on our site. And so the question, the gas pumps, we're actually in the process of designing a replacement for our existing underground storage tanks. So our tanks will be moved above ground and the pumps will be slightly closer to the building. Just south of where those existing pumps are becomes state land. So we are actually partially using the state land, which they've shown no objection to. So if we were only limited to the town land, we would really be in a squeeze.
I would presume the state would not be amenable to handing over more property to us for expansion.
Even if they were, it would be insufficient to meet the need that Bart's identified during tonight's hearing.
So as Nick mentioned, if anyone else, if anyone else is here to make a public comment, please feel free to raise your hand. I think maybe the thing to do is recognizing that we were already intending to keep this open, is to adjourn this public hearing.
For 2 weeks. Yep. Till the
You
16th.
have contact information, Jill, for Mr. Lucchese?
Not this, Mr. Lucchese, but
Okay.
evidently whatever information I gave to the administrator of the estate has conveyed it to other members of his family, which is why they knew about it. So
I see. Okay. If we
I
could
will-
maybe
I will-
do some outreach and try to make sure that they
Sure.
have better connection, better time next time.
Jill, is this a different family member than the one you have primarily been in contact with?
yes,
Got
I've
it.
been in touch with Mr. Larry Lucchese, who is the administrator of the estate. I don't know if this is his brother or his son or a
Got it. Thank you.
nephew. Okay. Okay. Do we want to go back to a couple of the other topics that we skipped?
So we would
Oh, I'm
just
sorry.
need to,
Just the motion
need
to
a
adjourn.
motion.
Sorry, I already wrote it down, so I thought we had done it.
I move to adjourn the public hearing until 2 weeks from today, the March 16th, at 7 p.m. or such other time as town board calls.
Second.
All in favor?
Hi.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right, Jill, what's next on our merry-go-round agenda this evening?
It's dizzying. Okay, might as well go back up to the top and let's talk about the town hall parking lot.
Great.
We've lost Bob Cioli, who's in the planning board meeting, unfortunately. So I
guess, maybe I'll start and then you want to jump in, Jill?
Sure.
So, as I think my fellow board members are aware, the town, at the time that the town board made the decision to move forward with the town hall playground and basketball court, the decision was made at that time that we would relocate the parking for town hall staff and visitors that was where the basketball court is today, to the front of town hall. And since that time, since we began construction on the playground and basketball court, employees of town hall have been parking their vehicles on what is now a gravel lot that is in front of town hall. In the fall, residents, neighbors of Newcastle Town Hall came to the town board and expressed their frustration with the fact that town employees have been parking on what used to be the town hall front lawn and has been for well over a year, this gravel parking lot. And questions were raised at that time as to why the town employees were doing so. And when we explained that this was what had been approved by previous town boards in order to construct the playground and basketball court, unfortunately, it came as a surprise to many neighbors and residents around town hall. And they expressed both their surprise in learning that this was going to permanently be a parking lot, as well as their frustration with us. And so back in the fall, this town board, agreed that we would do what we could to try to come up with a design that would both meet the needs of town hall employees and visitors to park here at town hall, and also hopefully respond to some of the feedback and concerns that we had heard from the neighbors, who were quite vocal in their frustration with us over what was being proposed. So with all of that said, we took all of that feedback really to heart. I know I did. And I subsequently tasked our town administrator, Jill Shapiro, and Bob Cioli, our town engineer, with trying to come up with a solution that would do better by the neighbors. So Jill, I'll leave that there, and then maybe you want to pick up on where we are today with that.
So we had an opportunity to meet with some of the neighbors again. We pared back the original parking plan for the front of the building. We were met with, let's put it this way, a lack of appreciation for our efforts up until that point. So one of the reasons why parking in front of Town Hall was actually important to us was that it's flat. The back parking areas require our seniors and those people with mobility issues to either access Town Hall through a very steep hill or stairs. And even for those who don't necessarily have parking permits, Christina will tell you, Lauren Cascone will tell you, for anyone who has watched our seniors struggle to access the back of the building during inclement weather and tax collection and to renew a handicap permit, et cetera, it's a challenge for them. And so the front parking was actually very important to us. It's level, it's easy for them to get into the building. Recreation is right downstairs. When our seniors go on activities and they're picked up by recreation, the fact that they have access to our handicapped accessible bathrooms right in the lower level of Town Hall and able to get into handicapped spots that are level right in front, all very important. During the pandemic, our staff has been taking advantage of the fact that we have a single point of entry into Town Hall in order to keep the building healthy. Anyone who comes into the building has their temperature checked, they're checked in. The building is not open to the public except for by appointment only, certain departments, and we space it out to make sure that we're able to sanitize the areas after people come in. That said, I sat down with Bob Cioli later this evening. The parking lot that was agreed to, although I would prefer it, I acknowledge the concerns of the neighbors, we've tried to express our point of view as best we can with it. So conceding their concerns and that there's too much blacktop that's going to be in the front of Town Hall. What I am suggesting to the board this evening is that we reseed the entire front of Town Hall. We preserve the parking that has always been in front of Town Hall, the row closest to Town Hall. We extend it around to Washington Avenue. We probably can pick up a couple of spaces. And according to Bob Cioli, what that will do for us is, because we are reducing the amount of permanent impervious space, we will not be required to put in the drainage that was a separator that separated out the oil from the stormwater that washes into Tertia Brook that's right next to us. That's between the $30,000 and $40,000 structure. We will not be required to put that in. And it will also save BART a little bit of paving when it comes later in the year, which will save the town additional monies as well. If it turns out that after the pandemic is over, Town Hall is used the way it's always been used, we have a lot of activities going on. Our conference rooms are used for various meetings. Our seniors are back and active in town. I expect that if we run out of parking, I will be coming back to the board and asking for them to reconsider restoring some of this parking that was proposed, because we will have the need for it. And again, the fact that it's flat makes it very handicapped accessible, you know, and it's not just for seniors, it's for, you know, moms with baby carriages, it's for small kids, not having to traipse them upstairs or up a steeple. So that's, I would like to be able to at least settle the front of town hall. I'd like to be able to task the conservation board, Lori, if we could ask you to work with conservation board and BAB and Dennis to perhaps expand the planting plan a little bit further in. We're very excited to be able to plant and finally restore the front of town hall, and understanding that people are still going to be heavily using the front of town hall. I fully expect that we are going to maintain a single point of entry to the building for at least the next 6 months until we have, you know, a significant portion of our population that is inoculated. So that's all I've got. Sorry,
We should
very
consult the
long-winded.
BAB also and have them.
Yes, both.
She said that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I just heard conservation. Okay.
And I work with both, so great.
Double duty.
So Jill, I'm super excited about this because I really, you know, had a difficult time, and that like with adding parking at the same time that we're rethinking use of our parking spaces. So so I think that's exciting. One of the questions that I had was, would we be kind of rethinking the number of handicap designated spots along the strip that you have there to kind of address the need?
We have 2 handicap spots there now. We've got 2 in the back. That's what's required of us. I can certainly ask Bob Cioli to add more. The interesting thing about my seniors is that I find that many who really should have a handicap parking permit do not have a handicap parking permit. And so because there is not an abundance of parking in the front now on a level area, I would hate to force someone who otherwise would be using one of those spots out of them. So.
Understood. That's very helpful.
Jill, first of all, you've done a great job. It's not been easy back and forth, so thank you very much. That's the nature of the beast, I guess, for you, right? So, but thank you. I do think, you know, thinking out loud, this is sort of an opportunity to think about, as I've referenced before, and I'll say it again, if you made Washington Avenue 2 directions, it makes it that much easier to use that back parking lot to access town hall, because otherwise everyone has to come in through Bell. If you're coming from Pleasantville, you're coming off of 117 going northbound, you have to come all the way across the hamlet, turn in by Bella, you know, into the train station lot, just to come all the way back and go to the town hall. It would be great, this, especially if we're not using all the parking we used to because less people are commuting, to open that for 2 ways, and then you can have access to the playground, basketball court from the backside as well as town hall.
I'll ask Bob Cioli if he'll take a look at that. There's obviously, you know, we need certain amount of clearance both ways. I don't want to, Bart's had a really long day, so I don't want to, you know, alarm him, but I'll have Bob Cioli look at it and just make sure turning radiuses and stuff like that. I do know that there is a choke point as you get to actually to that little bridge that we just replaced. Right. Where there may be a point where you can't go any further north.
And we don't have to
because it gets
down.
too tight.
The signage you can use. We can. I'm saying
Yeah,
the idea. I think taking people
of being
out of the
able to
hamlet,
access it from both ways. Right.
Yeah, because otherwise trying to redirect overflow to that spot would be pretty difficult, for sure.
Then we're losing all those spots in the train station too, so we'd want to make sure we look at that too. If you make that,
yeah, of course, but everyone's, I mean, some people can't have it both ways. Either we're losing spots, we should do something with the train station or not. So I think
right. I'm just saying, if we're studying it, we should look at like we're going to lose those spots too. So we have to just be cognizant of it.
Right. Well, I think what Jill is also pointing out, right, is that this can be a temporary designation, that if circumstances require the restoration of more spots in front, then, you know, it's not that huge a lift to turn grass back into parking if we had to.
Yeah, no, I was talking about Jeremy's point, making it two-way in the back, not this.
That you'd lose spots by making that a
Yeah.
two-way street.
Yeah.
Right, right. Commuter spots.
Yeah.
Which we may, you know, who knows, we may not need anymore, but just if he's looking, he's studying. So one thing, Jill, can we consider, this is great, and I think it really kind of finds the balance between, you know, residents' concerns that they don't want to be looking at blacktop and that it used to be a very pretty grass area with our need for additional parking. Can we potentially, I couldn't tell on the plan, like in the front, we have a lot of pretty plantings, but maybe along where the new like second, you know, tier of parking that's closer to Greeley, could we line that with trees as opposed to just grass?
Sorry, Lisa, what Jill's suggesting is not to have that second row. So we would only have the one row that's closest to town hall now. Jill, correct?
Right.
Can we, I'm sorry, can we line that with trees like these? I couldn't tell
Yeah,
what these
so
are.
there's, so the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the round dark green things.
What are those?
Trees.
Are those trees?
Those are trees, yeah.
Those are trees. I think it even says what species of trees they are.
Oh, I don't see that on here.
Yeah, they are a silver maple hybrid.
Oh, yeah. But can we do,
red and silver, October Glory.
I don't think we should do something, the firs are good. I don't think we should do something that loses its leaves.
Well, part of
possible.
Yeah, I mean,
well,
we have to use some of the trees that we have in our inventory. So we have
these trees sitting at Warburg that need a home desperately. Yes.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of places we could plant trees that we need. I'm just thinking if we want to block the view, it would be nice to be able to incorporate a few more of the.
I don't know who we're blocking the view from, but I have to tell you that that's a pretty expansive lawn, and we were planning on, you know, putting picnic tables and things like that in the center. I don't think anyone's really gonna. I'm gonna leave it to the conservation and BAB.
Mm-hmm.
You're tasked with landscaping. Go do.
Right. Jill, just a thought about parking spots. Because I will say I've received a lot of positive feedback about the 15-minute parking spots in the hamlet. Would this be helpful at town hall by any chance? I know that it exists at the library when people drop off, you know, their books and stuff.
Our biggest problem was not necessarily 15-minute parking. Our biggest problem was people who would come early in the morning and, you know, from out of town and take our town hall spots, and we would watch them walk to the train. So that has not been the problem recently. But we you know, traditionally we leave this only for visitors that staff park in the back. So we don't usually have a problem with people staying too long at town hall. Okay. But we could certainly look into it if it turns out that that's the case. The problem is that sometimes they're coming for like pre-construction meetings, so they're there a little bit longer. Sometimes things just take longer. I don't want to aggravate somebody who is going to justice court to, you know, plead a ticket, to have them come back out and, you know, they think it's only going to take 2 seconds and it took a lot longer and now they get another ticket. So I just
totally fair.
A little sensitive to that sort of stuff. I'm excited over the prospect that our parking lots are all going to be filled and that the people are going to be coming in and out again. It's like, you know, I really miss it. So I'm happy to come and revisit this with you again.
I mean, I think we're going to have to agree that we may have to revisit this again. I mean, you know, I'm like so grateful to you, Jill and Lauren and Tiffany and Rob and Christina and everybody who works at town hall. Bart, when you come by, everybody who works at town hall, for your willingness to give this a shot. And you know, I think your constant, I mean, over the course of the past year, the things that the town and you all have done to bend over backwards to, you know, really try to accommodate residents, the community, like seriously, thank you guys so much.
If we don't need Bart for anything else, I'm sending him home. I'm tired just looking at him. Thank you, Bart. Please drive very safely.
Thank you. And the water main is fixed.
Yay!
Great news.
Right, yeah.
Thank you, Bart, for and all your people working with you. It's
Yeah.
been
God,
appreciated.
please extend our thanks.
Yes, I will. Absolutely. Yeah. They were here till 12:30 last night on at Marquardt. We had another water leak.
They had another one.
I'll make sure they know. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bart. Have a good evening.
You're welcome.
All right, take care. Thank you. Okay, sorry. Next thing is the continuation of the waiver for the fees for the vacant store registry. Obviously, we still have been asking for the applications and making sure that we get all the information, but how does the board feel about the continuation of the waiver for the fees? Is that something that we can continue during the state of emergency at the very least?
Yeah, I think that, you know, the original idea behind the vacant storefront registry and the sort of fee associated with the registration that we required of property owners was that we were putting sort of a small but present sort of fee or tax, if you will, on having a vacant storefront in our hamlet. And the town board at that time had, you know, quite a spirited debate about whether or not that was appropriate, and ultimately landed on the fact that because we were entering the pandemic, that it was both not appropriate to charge a fee, and really that it should be suspended for the state of emergency. So in my view, we're still in a state of emergency, and we should continue to waive the fee for registration until such a time as we come back out of it and see the economy start to rebound. But, you know, the foundation is there to be able to, you know, when we are ready. And we also, I'm reminded of this, just sort of circling back to our conversation earlier, we also thought it was a good idea to do this because we had the moratorium in place too. So we were also sort of tying people's hands a little bit. So it made sense to do it from that perspective as well too. So just another thing to be
So to play devil's advocate here, once we lift the moratorium, I agree, it made sense to waive it, you know, but if it's going to be lifted, I think the board should think about it because we have towns like Mount Kisco that are renting storefronts right now and new places have been opening up. So once the moratorium is lifted, I'm not sure that we should be waiving this. I think that owners of buildings should be actively trying to seek to lease their spaces.
Do we think that this registry is an impediment to that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
So do we think that this vacancy registry is an impediment to that?
I think that charging property owners a fee because they have vacant storefronts would potentially put the a little fire under them to try to fill those spaces. And depending on the reason, if it's if it's because rents are too high or whatever it may be, they need to worry about that and start trying to find those.
So your opinion on this has changed then since last year, because at that time you did not support having fees associated with the vacant storefront registry. Do you feel that something has changed during the pandemic that might?
Well, I'm starting to see, yes, many other stores being leased in other towns. And when we were in the middle of a moratorium, it didn't make sense, I think, to charge somebody, but I think it might now.
How much is the fee?
I don't remember. It wasn't a lot.
It's nominal. We took it down to, I think, like it was originally $250 and we took it down to $50 maybe.
50. And
yeah, at that time, the town board did not all support the idea of having fees with the registry. So we took it way down from the original proposal to something that was quite nominal. So maybe
it's not like $50, so like $50 a month?
Annually.
No.
$50 a year.
Indeed.
It's not going to have any impact.
So,
it's just more of pay attention, do your part.
Correct.
Be on notice.
But we can revisit that. I mean, the framework is there now. We've set it up with the local law that we passed, right, Nick? I mean, we can revisit what that fee is that would incentivize people.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. That just requires a town board resolution because it's a fee schedule.
Great.
And we could use that money to, I don't know, try to decorate, the windows or try to make it at least look nicer even, in the meantime.
So Lisa, are you suggesting that we not only reinstate the fee, but we increase it?
I did not say that. I said we could use the money to decorate the windows.
Well, so maybe the thing for us to do is to have a further conversation about what we think the appropriate fee would be, since now there seems to be a newfound interest in fees. So, but from my perspective, we're still under the state of emergency, and I don't think now is the appropriate time to reinstate it. I think we should continue to waive it at this time.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Ivy. Also, part of the fee was because it kind of offset costs of advertising what the vacancies were, because a lot of folks have given us feedback that they never know what the current vacancies are in the hamlet, and they wish they had just a master list of it so that they know where the property is, what the rent is, who to contact. I mean, it's even more challenging when you see a property and they don't have any signage if it is vacant. You know what I mean? And so I think it was more of it was also just an informational tool.
Correct. Yeah. Yes.
I apologize because it's been a long time since we've talked.
Yeah. No, also included in that legislation, right, was the requirement that there would be a sign posted in the window, and that when we intook this form from them, that we would create the online registry that we have now today. I don't know that charging a fee though offsets any costs that we have. I mean, I would say the costs on our side are pretty nominal. It's just with regard to maintaining that registry. I mean, Jill, maybe that's something we could, if we're rethinking fees, maybe that's something we could check in with Tom DePaul on, if there's, a fee associated with the amount of time that it takes him to, maintain the registry, or to, walk around town and notice the vacant storefronts that he needs to be in touch with, or, whatever that sort of labor cost might look like too.
But I think there's an opportunity to post either on the town website or the Discover Chappaqua website. And whatever it is, I think that the information is really important, because again, we talk a lot about vacant storefronts, but so many folks don't realize which are vacant.
Great. Well, and we do have that registry now that's on our website. So we can think about linking to that from Discover Chappaqua maybe.
Yeah, I just think, Lauren, I think you had mentioned it, I don't know, recently, where it would be a great idea to kind of decorate the windows, or maybe I did, maybe it was an article in the New York Times I sent everyone, that it was, we could decorate the windows just to make it look nicer for the vacant storefronts, and we could use even the nominal amount of money. And to say it's, we're still in a state of emergency is not really swaying me so much, because I'm seeing other towns start to have vacant stores, and you guys want to look at rezoning the downtown in a state of emergency. So to me, charging a nominal fee for vacant storefronts during the same time.
Do towns like Mount Kisco charge a fee? Have you looked into that? Whether Mount Kisco has a vacancy tax?
I have not. Have you?
No, but you mentioned Mount Kisco. That's why I was asking if you knew.
No, I'm saying Mount Kisco is having storefronts starting to be leased. Athleta just came in. There's a new European store that just came in. There's a lot of other stores coming in. So my point is, maybe it's a time that, yes, maybe back then when people weren't venturing out as much, it made more sense not to do that. But now people are starting to get out a little more, and everyone needs to be careful. But I think if the economy starts to move a little bit and we're seeing stores being rented in other towns, maybe that could happen in our town too.
Oh, okay. I'm just having a little hard time seeing how a $50 a year fee is preventing us from renting our storefronts.
Okay, well, you can certainly propose to increase that fee. That's great.
So, Lisa, with regard to the idea of decorating storefronts, I think it's great, and I would be really interested in seeing the Arts and Culture Committee actually take a look at that and maybe put together a proposal for us. And I don't necessarily think that we have to link that to the vacant storefront registry or the sort of fees associated with that. mean, we could also look at using, there are other budget lines I think we could consider whether to use, even, if it's something small, we can look at the 1.5 for that as well. So, I mean, I think it'd be great. I think it'd be great to look into that. I think it's a fantastic idea.
Good, and that's something Discover Chappaqua can look at as well, I think. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, proposed Quaker Street Water Main Improvement Project and preliminary capital budget project. So as the board may recall, the county is expanding its sewer trunk line up 120, up Quaker Road to Wagon Road Camp. As part of their project, they have asked whether or not we want to piggyback on to their excavation and installation of this new sanitary sewer line with any infrastructure that we may have. And we have an aging water main, believe it or not, that runs up 120. And so we are asking the board to create the capital project budget for the overall installation of a new water main that would run up 120 and would be installed along with the county's project. Number one, to save money. Number two, to save the headache of having to excavate Route 120 a second time for us to be able to do our project. So the other thing that the board should be aware of is the fact that the county had already engaged an engineer to take and create plans for their sanitary sewer. Because the contractor should be working with a single set of plans, we approached that same engineer asking whether or not they could take and give us a proposal for the engineering that would be required to lay out our water main, having the proper distances and depths and things like that, so that we can install our new water main in tandem with the counties. So that information actually is in front of you. The overall capital project is going to be $4.42 million. It's hefty. That's the capital project. The lump sum right now for the engineering services is $650,000 for the engineering services that would allow us to take and engage the same engineer that the county has hired to take and create the plans that would allow us to install our water main as the sewer main excavation and installation is being done as well. This is something that's been in, has been identified as a capital project going forward. This is part of the elimination of the pinch point for the county trunk line that runs through that runs through Hunts Lane, and also will allow the diversion project for Riverwoods and Yeshiva to move forward.
So Jill, is the total 4.4 plus the 650?
The 650 is within the 4.4.
Oh, it's within. Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Much better.
So this is a really big deal. This is a great thing. I mean,
this is actually a fabulous thing. That Riverwoods
next
is going to be
generation infrastructure for Newcastle. This might be one of the big things we're working on.
Yeah, I know. Sort of gets lost in the weeds, but it will allow us to take and expand the sewer district going up to those properties along 120 going forward, which is just fabulous. It's going to allow us to take and, replace some much needed antiquated infrastructure, water infrastructure that we've got. Obviously, we're going to be looking for grants along the way to help defray the costs of these things. But we're very excited that the county has accelerated their plans for this project and has actually, put this into motion. We never thought this diversion project was going to get off the ground. And so we are just, we're thrilled. I know it's a huge price tag and it's, fabulous amounts of money, but this is just major for town. It really is. Okay. And last but not least, we've got, I'm sorry, does anybody have any questions on that? You're good? Okay. Last but not least, it's authorization to purchase equipment repair services. We've got a John Deere loader that has transmission issues. So we'd like to be able to approve it. It's just one of those larger fees. And I think I've hit everything. We've got some administrative items. Authorization to approve a positive youth development program. It's an IMA, the county and our police. Authorization to reimburse educational expenses that for water operator certification for it's Brendan Riley and Tom Costello, our new highway foreman and our deputy commissioner of public works. A review of the 2021 tax bill updates. I just wanted the board to be aware, because of COVID, we actually are changing the wording on the back of our tax bills. And so we just wanted to bring it to the board's attention. There's a template of it in the packet. If you could just take a look at it, see what you think, make sure, you know, under the theory that many sets of eyes looking at something will let us know whether or not we've presented the information as clearly as we can. We just basically pointed out the fact that there's a Dropbox in town hall and the payments can be left in the Dropbox anytime up until 7 p.m. on Friday, April 30th. Okay. And we're also going to look into, I think, either doing this in red or highlighting it on the back of our tax bills and see what the price differential is, because we'd like it to let's see, so we got authorization to disperse funds for the Holocaust and Human Rights Committee. They are about to launch their second, or they have launched their second annual poetry and art contest. And we share in their, we help underwrite their prize money. That's about it. I think we are ready for resolutions. Unless I missed something, please let me know. I feel like we were a little out of order there. Okay. And a payment of claims as always. Okay, I think we're ready for resolutions if everybody's got it. Lauren, did I miss anything? Gascon? No? Godwell?
Just that late edition.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, the police reporter. I apologize, guys. This is sent around under a separate cover. The police have been literally negotiating a new contract, new multi-year contract for a police recorder. And so they literally have settled on the price tag today for it. Lauren, do you have the amount? It's $3,000 for this year. Do you have the amount of the?
Yes. So for the first year, it would be a total cost of $3,250, and it's a 5-year kind of lease agreement. So after for years 2 through 5, it would be an annual rate of $9,889.66.
Which is actually less than what we paid for the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. Can somebody just back up and tell me what a police recorder is?
It's the voice recorder for the 911 calls and for all the calls that come in through the police desk. Everything is recorded. And so the systems are proprietary, and chief, shopped around to see if there was something better that he could do. And March sort of came up on him fast and furious. But yeah, the last time we did this was 2016, and we actually got a better price than last time. But he thought he would go for something completely different, but the pricing was too cost prohibitive. So he ended up going for the old faithful. So we're going to be asking the board for a renewal. The contract literally ended 3/1.
Yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday. So it's okay. We still have we're still recording. It's just we're not supported at the moment, which is not a good thing. Sorry.
Well, I was looking to see if the resolution for that was circulated. I'm not seeing it.
It wasn't, because it came in after I sent out everything.
Okay.
I can read it for you if you'd like. I did make one.
All right. Do you want to read it all? At least to approve the.
If you needed us to read it into the record, then we would need to see it.
Okay, I can circulate it real quick.
That'd be great. Thank you. Just send it to the board. Thank you. Thank you.
Did you send it out, Lauren? You want to kick off, or
Sure.
someone?
Can we start with resolutions, Jill?
Yeah, please.
Okay, great. I move to approve the payment of claims in the amount of $1,024,580.03 listed on the summary pre-check writing report and detailed voucher detail reports, all dated February 25th, 2021. Checks will be issued and mailed to each claimant listed on Wednesday, March 3rd, 2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to adopt the following resolution. Resolved that the town comptroller is authorized and directed to pay invoice number 31667 from the law firm of Hodges Walsh and Burke LLP in the amount of $1,235 for legal services rendered and disbursements relating to its investigation of notice of claim served upon the town on December 30th, 2019.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move to authorize the Recreation and Parks Department to enter into an agreement with First Congregational Church to utilize their facility for the 2021 TOTS Summer Camp Program for a fee of $16,500.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to authorize Valuation Plus Incorporated to update their appraisal for 220-230 Joe Corwin Way for the total cost of $2,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move to accept the resignation of Sid Falkson from the Ethics Board effective February 25th, 2021, and thank you for your service.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to authorize the adoption of recommendations from the Town of Newcastle Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative Committee as outlined in the report attached hereto, dated February 26, 2021, pursuant to New York State Executive Order 203. And again, thank everyone who participated in this effort.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to authorize the Town of Newcastle to enter an agreement with Westchester County to provide a positive youth development program in which the county will reimburse the town in the amount not to exceed $3,399 effective January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to accept the retirement of Sergeant Mary Hanson from the Newcastle Police Department effective March 26, 2021. The town would like to thank Mary for her 20 years of dedicated service.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move to authorize the reimbursement of educational expenses to be incurred by Assistant Commissioner Costello and Water Grade 1 Riley for the Water Operator Certification Grade D course for the amount of $475 per person, plus the cost of materials, which is estimated at $100 per person, in an amount not to exceed $1,200 collectively for both attendees.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move to authorize the disbursement of funds to the Holocaust and Human Rights Committee in the amount of $398, which represents half of the prize money for the 2021 Holocaust Remembrance Writing and Arts Contest, to be remitted to the winner on Friday, April 16th, 2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I could do the voice recorder when I see it.
Thanks, Lori.
Move to approve a lease from Fleetwood Finance Leasing for a voice recording system for a term of 5 years, with the cost of the first year being $3,250 and years 2 through 5 at the annual rate of $9,889.66, bringing the total cost over the term of the lease to $42,808.64.
Second.
All in favor?
Sorry.
Aye.
Move to adjourn.
And that brings to a close another fabulous town board work session.
Talk full. Exciting content.
But I do need a motion.
Someone.
I move to adjourn. And second. Second.
You moved, Lori moved, I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank
Have a
you,
great
thank you.
night.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.